Good afternoon. This is Dr. John Bennett from sunny Miami. Today we have another in the series of Hangouts from MedGadget.com. Today we have the pleasure of having Jonathan Dreyer. He works for Nuance Healthcare Communications. He's the director of the Cloud and Mobile Solutions and Marketing, I believe. And we're also joined by the editor of MedGadget, Gene Ostrowski. Hello, Gene.
Hello, John. And Jonathan, welcome to MedGadget's Hangout.
Great, thanks, guys.
Yeah, this is going to be fun, John. Okay, Gene and I both have a lot of questions, but why don't you just take us through your presentation, and then we'll ask you a few questions. And welcome.
Okay, great. Thanks again. So, yeah, what I want to do is I want to set the stage a little bit. I've actually been with Nuance for about 8.5 years now in the healthcare division, and I started out my career in the radiology space, and about 5 years ago, transitioned into a role where we were starting to build out our cloud platform for Dragon Medical, for our front-end speech recognition for clinical users. So the better part of the last 5 years has really been about transitioning and shifting the model and the way in which the speech recognition technology for physicians and nurses and other clinical professionals is delivered. And we recently announced a new platform, Dragon Medical One, which I want to share a little bit about that today because it really sets a nice foundation for not only the kind of evolution of the Dragon Medical solution, but also the connected ecosystem of applications that are now also powering these devices, these different platforms and workflows that physicians are engaging in. And I'm sure as we have our discussion in a little bit, we'll talk about how those new workflows, how those new devices, and how those new platforms are really playing a integral role in the day-to-day lives of physicians. So we'll go ahead and share just a quick couple set of slides here to set the stage, and just to make sure you guys can see everything okay there.
That's right, we can see that.
Okay, great. Yeah, so what I want to do is I just wanted to take you here and just set the stage a little bit. I'm sure we have a number of viewers on that have some familiarity with the Dragon Medical solution. And it's important to kind of set the stage. But before we jump into it, I really want to set the tone here by sharing a few pieces of stats. So we had our team about 2 months ago look into some information pulled from our systems. You know, we have hundreds of thousands of physicians today using our speech recognition technology, and there's a lot of data and insight that can be gleaned from that. So when we look at this and kind of the shift and the change in the industry, you know, the first part of this is that we know physicians are overwhelmed with documentation, and that really shouldn't come as any surprise. But when we start to dig into it, it was an opportunity for us to really put into perspective the sheer magnitude of documentation that physicians are faced with. So we know a couple stats here, high level: 43% of a doctor's workday is spent on data entry. That is roughly 4,000 clicks on an average day of documentation to input that patient information into the health record. And then the last stat here on the screen is kind of personally a really interesting one to me. We looked at the past year, and we wanted to assess the most active user on our cloud platform. So we had the team look into that information, and we determined the most active user of the cloud platform had documented 7.2 million words in a single year. And you know, the first reaction to this, I couldn't tell you if that was a high number, a low number. I really wasn't sure because we had no metric to gauge that against. So we decided to run the numbers or run the math a little bit on that 7.2 million. So 7.2 million words, it is roughly 16,000 sheets of 8.5 by 11 paper, so 12-point font, single-spaced sheets of paper, that if you were to stack those 16,000 sheets on top of each other would tower to about 5 foot 3 inches tall. So when you kind of take that perspective on it, it becomes really tangible when you can equate that to something that's a little bit more in line with something that we can relate to. So the point here being is that, you know, we know that physicians are overwhelmed with documentation and the amount of documentation they have to create. And as we talk today, I'm interested to get both your thoughts on this as well. But one of the things that we're really focused on is how do we improve the relationship between the physician and the technology, and allow the physician to get back to spending more time with the patient by delivering better ways for them to access information and document it.
Jonathan, excuse me. you're still on the first slide. You want to still be on the first slide?
Yeah, yep, I do. Yep.
Okay, I just want to check. Okay.
Yep, no problem. Sure. So a few other things too that's I think equally important is just to set the stage. We're seeing a shift and a trend where the physicians are doing more things in more places on more devices, and the sheer inherent mobility of a physician is coming into play. So the number of steps that the average healthcare professional takes in a day is almost 2.5 times that an average American takes. The fact that a overwhelming percentage of physicians are starting to use their personal mobile devices to communicate patient data. So this is a little bit of a foreshadowing to an area that I want to dive into a little bit later, but where we look at how do we account for the workflow where the physician is doing more beyond just the traditional EHR entry of patient information. And then also the fact that we did some surveys of CIO clients of ours that had cited portability as one of the key priorities for this coming year. So how do they make it more accessible, more convenient for the physicians to do what they need to do to get through the requirements of the day. And then the last piece of this, just again to kind of set the stage, is we're seeing that general shift of physicians starting to access clinical documentation technology from other devices and platforms. We know that it's much faster than manual data entry or input. We'll talk, I'm sure, a little bit today about some of the ways in which we can create a more natural interface for the physicians to create their documentation, again, give them the ability to face the patient, spend time with the patient, and let the technology adapt to them. And then the sheer amount of time from just a pure time savings perspective that the technology delivers. So before we get into that, do you guys do you have any questions or thoughts on some of the upfront kind of stage setting here?
Well, I don't know if you want to talk about it now, but when you acquired Dragon, I guess Nuance was a standalone company before they bought Dragon.
I'm going to pop out of the screen here. Okay, so you can see me again?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, so sorry, go ahead, John.
Yeah, can you trace the history of your company for Nuance? I know you probably weren't with it. You've been with it for 5 years, correct?
About 8.5. Actually, I came in through an acquisition in the radiology market. So there's been, the company has existed for the better part of 2 decades. And there's a number of homegrown technologies that have been acquired in and been built together to create our healthcare division and our solution set. And maybe as we talk a little bit about this Dragon Medical One platform, gives us a good opportunity if we focus on specifically the front-end speech recognition piece of it. We can talk a little bit about the evolution of it. I think that might make sense because it'll give some good context and background of where the technology has come from and really the direction that it's headed now.
Did Nuance buy Dragon or Dragon buy Nuance, or how did that work?
Yeah, it was Nuance had acquired Dragon technology.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right, so let's go back into screen share so we should be able to see that again. All right, you see this screen with the circle on it?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I think what's really important is to start with, if we talk about Dragon Medical One, so I mentioned before, this is really the evolution of the Dragon Medical family of solutions, and it's evolved pretty rapidly over the last few years, especially as we start to move the technology to a cloud deployment. And we're now at a point where we're delivering this single platform, single voice profile, single experience, consistent experience for the physician. We have a number of physicians that are still using transcription solutions, back-end speech recognition solutions. They're using some combination of technology which may be on-premise versions of our Dragon Medical solution. So Dragon Medical Network Edition is a on-premise version where it's locally installed at a hospital or a client site. We've started in the last few years to further our relationships with the electronic health record providers to embed the Dragon Medical technology into their applications. So this comes in the form of mobile applications, web-based applications, desktop apps from Epic, Cerner, Athena, Meditech, Clinical Works, all of the major EHR vendors, as well as specialty market providers for different specialties like dermatology, plastic surgery, orthopedics, etc. And then built on top of this is the cloud platform, which is at the very top of this stack, which is kind of the focus of what I wanted to touch on today around the Dragon Medical One platform. So this essentially takes our core technology, and I think I mentioned a little bit up front, but I just want to kind of make one point clear. When we ventured down this path of moving to the cloud, it really wasn't about just taking our on-premise solutions and putting those into the cloud, quote unquote. It was more about evolving a connected ecosystem that provided that experiential continuity for the physician as they move between devices and form factors and locations. So the platform itself is you can think of it as kind of part evolution of that Dragon Medical family. So years ago, we had standalone boxed products, CDs physicians would install in their practice or clinic. That evolved over time into an enterprise solution, which had a client-server architecture on site, and we still have those solutions in the market today. And then in the last few years, it's the evolution into this remotely hosted cloud platform, and we'll talk about maybe some of the trends that were driving this around virtualization of the EHR and the physician workstation. Again, the general shift to mobility solutions for the physician, whether that's doing documentation through an EHR mobile app, and I'll show some examples of this later. We'll do a quick demo. Or it could be also kind of this new area that we've seen, which is the middle part of the right-hand side of the screen here, this innovation area, where over the last few years we've seen, really over probably the last 18 to 24 months, we've seen a huge uptick in these applications that live outside of the EHR and have a significant impact on the day-to-day routine for the clinical professional. Things like secure messaging platforms, care coordination platforms, population health, clinical reference tools. So all of these ancillary solutions that work with the EHR and also support those day-to-day tasks of the physician. We'll talk about this as we go through the discussion today, but it really gets into the ability to move beyond just the EHR workflow and provide a secure clinical speech experience that cuts across all those different application types. And that's kind of an exciting area for us as we've launched this new platform. And then the last piece is just to tie it all together. We have an analytics package that provides one thing our clients have asked for over the years is really the ability to get a insight into the users, how they're using the technology, which users are really the most efficient and productive with the technology. How do you pinpoint other physicians that may need additional assistance or training for one reason or another? What's the kind of a pulse check on the system, and that comes tied together through this analytics package on the platform, as well as a whole suite of enhancements. So we look beyond just the speech experience. We talk about how do we improve note quality and compliance, how do we provide additional tools to let physicians leverage the devices that they have today, for example, their smartphone, to use that. One of the latest solutions we released about a year ago effectively turns the physician's smartphone into a secure microphone. So it really starts to expand the reach and accessibility to the technology, and that's kind of one of the real key takeaways here.
Yeah, excuse me, Jonathan, you're still on the Dragon Medical One slide. Is that where you want to be?
It should be on the next one. It should have it should say portability.
Okay, you might have to do it manually. Click on the slide to the left column. Click on the slide you want on the left.
You go back and forward.
But sometimes it doesn't. It's on automatic. It doesn't move.
Did that change? I went back and forward.
No, it's still the same Dragon Medical One slide.
Okay, so let's see if this now.
There you go. Portability to work at any workstation. There you go.
Great. Yep. And I only have about 4 slides or so left here, and then we'll get into the discussion. So one piece. This is probably where some people have familiarity with the Dragon Medical solution at the desktop level. Is you have a toolbar, you're able to dictate at the cursor into the EHR, so creating your documentation as a physician, your progress notes, your letters, and H&P review systems, completing your notes at the EHR. So at the desktop, what this is essentially this toolbar acts as that access point into the cloud. So it's a very lightweight application. It can be virtualized. I mentioned before we've seen a number of clients that have virtualized deployments, whether that's through Citrix or VMware or any other types of virtualized environment solution, and the ability to have access to that highly accurate, highly secure, professional-grade speech recognition for the physician is really important. So no profile training involved here from a voice profile perspective. So we've made a lot of progress in the recent years as far as automating a number of the things that the physicians may have had to go through in the past. So automatic accent detection, microphone calibration, and then the creation of the single voice profile that continues to adapt over time. So the ability to pull forward the maybe potentially years of effort that physicians have put into personalizing their experience with Dragon Medical or with our transcription platform, pulling that forward really gives a lot of ability to transition them into these different dictation methods or opportunities. We then have, did it just change the screen?
No, it didn't.
Didn't? Okay, so I don't know why this is. I might have to come in and out of it. Okay, yeah, I'll pop in and out for the next 2-3 screens here. So the next piece is really exciting. Is on the platform, we are introducing this capability for a physician to create a personal ID. So this is their Nuance Healthcare ID, and this is really exciting because it's the first time that we've actually put the power in the clinician's hand to let them personalize their experience. And by doing that, they're able to gain access to new features and products and services as they emerge. And we'll talk a little bit about this, and I'll show again a quick demo a little bit later as we have our conversation, but it'll really help to bring that to life. So the ability to, we'll go ahead into the next slide here, the ability for a physician to access their speech profile, their templates, their custom words, their personalizations, and that Dragon Medical speech experience outside of the traditional desktop workflow. So now we're talking about we're able to enable that same experience through mobile productivity apps. So these are those types of apps I mentioned earlier in the discussion here: secure messaging, communication, care coordination, telemedicine, pop health. All of these areas that we're seeing pop up, and the use cases where speech is playing a really, really integral role. So this is an exciting part, a real differentiator on the platform from the way the technology has been delivered in the past. And then I mentioned the compatibility piece of this, so the compatibility with other workflow enhancements. So how do we take and build on that core speech experience? So things like note quality and compliance, so ensuring the level of specificity and the quality of the note is there. That's Dragon Medical Advisor. PowerMic Mobile turns your smartphone into a microphone. So traditionally, a physician would walk up to a desktop workstation. They have a USB-powered microphone, shortcut buttons on the microphone. We're able now to replicate that hardware device, that physical hardware device that's plugged into the machine in a smartphone. So now they can essentially walk up, securely, wirelessly connect to Dragon Medical at the desktop. They have all the same button functionality. They're auto-paired, and they're ready to go. So that really frees them as physicians move beyond the four walls of the hospital, to the clinic, to home, on the road, wherever they may be. It gives them the ability to continue to have access to creating their documentation, and we're trying to take down as many of those technology barriers as possible. The other piece, and just a few more things, and then we'll pop out of this and have the discussion. The ability to, as I mentioned, give insights into the system. So this is more for the IT staff and the administrators and analysts, but the ability to have high-level trending dashboard views of where and how physicians are creating their documentation, how efficient they are at that. We've got some really great metrics that are able to be gleaned from this data. Things, for example, that provide a really nice insight into the amount of effort that a user is putting into creating their documentation. So not necessarily an accuracy measure, but how much effort is being exerted to creating that documentation, how much they're changing the information that they're putting in, how many voice commands they're using to streamline their workflow, how many auto texts or templates. So it gives you a real holistic view across the desktop, the mobile devices, the web integrations, all the different touch points now that feed into the same core system, and gives a real nice view of the way that the physicians are using the documentation in areas to really maximize the investment from a client perspective. And then the last piece here that we'll touch on is when you think about this, if you step back, what this essentially is doing is creating this new foundation for clinical documentation. So on the left-hand side, you have this core experience with Dragon Medical One, the cloud platform, a couple components that make up that platform, a desktop application to dictate across Windows-based devices, the healthcare ID to personalize the user's experience, speech now beyond the EHR workflow into those mobile productivity apps, and then a way to holistically look at the information in the system and ensure that you have that high level of efficiency and productivity for the physician. So couple that with all of these workflow enhancements to ensure no quality, compliance, accessibility. It really rounds out this new foundation for clinical documentation. So that is that. Hopefully that gives some good context to it. And can you see me again?
Yes.
Perfect. Awesome.
Go ahead, Gene.
Thank you, Jonathan. I haven't used the voice recognition extensively in a number of years, and I'd love to see some kind of a demo because, to me, being able to transcribe all the medical terms must be quite a challenge for the computer. How good is it, and is it getting better all the time? Like, how are you working on that?
Yeah, great question. So I'll show you in just a minute. I'll show you a demo actually off my iPhone. Give you an example of a mobile EHR application, and that'll give you some good context of what that looks like. So to answer your question, so there's a number of things from a technology aspect that have been done over the years to advance the core technology. So the accuracy for the users, being able, I mentioned as part of the presentation, the ability to automate a number of the kind of processes for the user. As you probably come to expect on a cloud platform, the ability to take and rapidly progress the technology itself is just kind of inherent in the architecture of how the platform is. You also have all these endpoints, so whether the physician's at their desktop creating their documentation, whether they're on their iPhone, iPad, or Android device creating documentation through the EHR, whether they're in their secure messaging application, every one of those endpoints connects into a single profile for that user, and the ability to have them, as they make changes, make corrections, their profile adapts over time. So all of those are contributing for that individual user, and then we're able to also, just in the nature of the cloud platform, ensure that all the physicians have access to the latest version of the technology. So where in years past, you'd have to deliver some software, that would go into a roadmap of planning from a client perspective of when IT would roll it out. We're now able to push a number of those updates just inherently in the infrastructure of how the system is designed.
Well, Jonathan, thank you very much. In the past, as you know, physicians complained about having to go back and edit. And I know that your recognition software has gotten better. Can you give a number to it? Is there 98%, 99%?
Yeah, yep, that's a good question. So we always get a question around the accuracy. So there's high 90% out of the gate on the accuracy. Again, that continues to improve over time. One thing that I think is important, because this is all linked now to a single profile, what that does is that ensures that as you're making those changes and those corrections and those edits, if you do have any to make, those are updated across all the touch points, right? You may have been in the past in a disconnected mode where you had an on-premise solution or you had different solutions potentially touching different systems, and you wouldn't have that consistency necessarily across board. A number of clients do, but it just depends on how the systems are deployed. In addition to that, there's a couple things I mentioned in the analytics side of it. This measurement that we have, this thing called the cumulative change ratio, is really a great metric, because what it does is it takes into account the changes that a user makes in their documentation. So that could be a misrecognition, or that could be a change of mind, right? They change how they want to word something. It could be that they dictated something incorrectly and they go back over it, either delete the text, voice over it, dictate over it, type over it, insert a command, delete a command. Any of that now factors in, so we have a measurement and we know the range in which a typical user falls. So we can do a lot with that information. And we can also pinpoint users that we may need to target. It might be potentially, the microphone that they're using for input. If they're using a mobile device, we've seen also users that have certain cases that actually obscure microphone ports. So it's not necessarily that the engine isn't getting the recognition. There might be a challenge with the audio quality coming in. So we do a lot on the back end also to filter out noise and to clean that audio so that we ensure that we have the highest accuracy with that user.
You know, one thing one physician mentioned to me about I think it was specifically Dragon, was that he said that it gets better if the physician spends more time with it. Can you comment on that? Is that, like, in other words, maybe it gets to know you better than maybe you mentioned that about profile? It gets to know your accent, gets to know your phrases you use?
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. So it does. So what happens with the system, and I'll speak specifically to the cloud platform. The first time a user logs into the system, I mentioned there's no voice profile training per se. So in the past, the user would have to go through a script, create read through these scripts to basically set up the profile. So today, it's automated out of the gate. So just similar to what you would expect from a consumer product when you pick that up with speech recognition today. It's the technology, underlying technology has advanced so far that you have that high level of accuracy out of the gate. What we're doing is we're taking that, we're automatically attributing, kind of tuning the dials, if you will, for that physician's profile. So you're creating what's the best accent filter, what are the different settings and the calibration. Again, microphone input quality is really important. So being able to automate all of that. We also have, one thing I didn't mention, the users can select their medical specialty models. So we have things like general medicine, pathology, OB, mental health. So there's a whole set of probably a dozen or so specialty models, which also help to tip the scales in the favor for accuracy based on the type of documentation, the type of physician that's actually doing that documentation.
Thank you.
Yep, and it does, and again, all the times that you make corrections or you make edits, it adds and contributes to the optimization of that profile. So would it make sense, do you guys want to see a quick, maybe I can see a quick, and I can talk to you about some of the, what I think one of the important things, especially if someone hasn't had experience with some of the latest technology, is the continuity of the experience, especially as you move into these smaller form factor devices. So let me go ahead and share my, I'm going to share my iPhone here, and let me just make sure. Tell me when that is up on screen.
I've never seen this before. This is good. This will be a first, Gene.
Oh, there we go.
All right. So what this is, so I mentioned, over the last probably 3-4 years, we've done a lot to build the relationships with our EHR partners, where they've actually taken our toolkits and they've embedded them into their mobile applications and web-based applications. Actually, just about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, we announced or we released a version of our technology embedded in the Athena Clinical's web-based EHR. This is just a demo application I've created here, very much from a speech perspective, what a user would expect in Epic's mobile apps, HiQ Canto, or Cerner PowerChart Touch, or eClinical Mobile, eClinical Touch. These are all EHR applications that are powered by Dragon Medical through this cloud platform. So let's go ahead and just take a look. This is just, again, a sample application. I'm going to log in. Here you should be able to see the patient list. And I'm going to select a patient here off the list, and I'm going to create a note. So one thing, before we actually get into this, one thing that you'll notice here is you'll notice that there is a bar across the bottom of the screen, right? So this bar across the bottom of the screen is essentially a Dragon bar. So very similar to what the physician would see on the desktop. They have their ability to pop up their microphone. They have the microphone here to record. So when I touch that, it's going to stream my audio in real time to the cloud. Then it's going to bring back the text to the device. And I'll talk about other things too, because it's more than just the speech-to-text workflow. So go ahead and let's go ahead and insert a template first off. Insert SOAP note. So we pull in a SOAP note. We have the fields just as the user would have in their template on the desktop. And I can go ahead and let's do some free text dictation just to show that workflow first. 64-year-old female with a history of hypertension and diabetes presents complaining of urinary frequency, urgency, and dysuria, along with hematuria and a low-grade fever, period. The patient has some mild nausea, but denies vomiting, period. She denies cough, shortness of breath, or other complaints, period. Stop listening. So I'll pause for a second. So you can see, right, that just by doing my free text dictation, I've dictated just the subjective section of this note. So, highly accurate, responsive. Everything's happening, again, remotely. There's nothing done locally on the device from a speech perspective. So we're streaming the audio, it comes back. We also don't do any persistent storage. We know security is a really important aspect, especially in the healthcare domain. So we're not actually storing any of the audio locally on the device. We purge it after that session. The EHR in this example here becomes the persistent storage for that information. Now, the other thing here is, as you look at this, so I mentioned the experience that the user has on the desktop. So your templates, your custom words, your vocab, all of that, but also just the general capabilities that users have become accustomed to with previous versions of Dragon Medical. So the ability, for example, especially on a mobile device, I find the magnifying glass sometimes challenging to highlight text and kind of move the cursor. So using voice just as a physician would on the desktop, let's go ahead and select some text. So you'll see I'll turn the microphone on and I'll just use voice. Select hypertension through hematuria. So just using voice, you can see that you can use the voice not only to dictate, but also to select text, edit text. I can use a number of different voice commands and navigation techniques. I mentioned the experience for the user, again, across platforms is consistent. So if I go into my, my personalizations and settings, I have access to all my commands, my auto text. I have my vocabulary manager. I can create, add words to my vocab. I can create pronunciations. I can train words if there's a particular word that I need to train, or if I need to add any proper names, facility names, physician names to the vocab. So full capability, again, we want to be device agnostic from the standpoint of providing that same experience consistently across the devices and platforms. So was that helpful?
Yes, I have a question. Are you able to trade or to share your profile in any way with the others in your clinical group? Because the same words are used. If you use IEEE often in your group for some reason, maybe is that possible?
Great. That's a great question. So the general structure of how these profiles are created there are organization level, group level, and individual user customizations. So the individual user, you as the standalone clinical professional, has the ability to create that custom set of templates, words that you add to your vocab, pronunciations for you. You can also create at a group level or at a site or organization level different sets of, again, auto text templates, etc. So those can be shared universally. Sometimes what we see is there'll be users that create a set and those get promoted up for use across their group or across their organization. So absolutely, there's different ways to organize those personalizations.
Okay.
Voice recognition and EMR, that's a little market, a good-sized market.
Sorry?
Voice recognition and EMR, that's a huge market.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen a lot of success over the years, again, with our Dragon Medical solutions, especially across the desktop. And as we're starting to see these other form factors and the EHRs continuing to create more rich experience out of these mobile and web-based applications, it just benefits the physician because, again, I think the end state here, the real takeaway is being able to provide, there's so much inconsistency in the day-to-day lives of physicians and what they're doing and the systems they interact with. If we can bring that continuity from a voice-driven clinical documentation perspective, it's a huge win, right? It gives them more time, it makes it more accessible and convenient for them to get their documentation completed, and ultimately it frees them up to spend more time with the patient.
Oh yeah, it drives a lot of physicians out of practice.
Yeah, there's a lot of stats.
Quit medicine, they say it's too much paperwork, too much.
Yeah, I can share some things with you guys after too, and we can maybe post a link. We did some work, part of that research I shared early on, which provides more information as well about frustration and kind of the burden and burnout rates. And we've seen, I think we've all probably seen these articles recently about quantifying some of that as well.
So everyone thought EMRs would cut down on the paperwork, but that really hasn't happened, has it, Jonathan?
Well, yeah, it's different, right? It's a change from how users have conducted their routine and their day-to-day tasks, plus all the government regulations, everything else that comes into play that creates more burden from a documentation perspective. And that really actually plays into the other part that I alluded to, which was going a step further and being able to actually look at note quality, compliance. How do we do things where we can use natural language processing to essentially do a lot of the structuring of that content for the physician? So we have a number of technologies that work with the Dragon Medical solutions to ensure quality and compliance of the notes, as I mentioned. So being able to look at ICD-10 specificity, for example, in the note, or with some of our partners, Epic, for example, with their note reader solution, they're using our NLP technology, which we call clinical language understanding in our domain. And what that does is it essentially allows a physician to create a note. They document the note, and then when they go to sign their note, it runs through this process of our system. It gets presented right back in the EHR to them, and it presents them with problems, meds, allergies as coded elements that they can get to the patient chart. So now instead of having to go out and actually commit these things and go into different fields and enter this information, we let them capture that clinical narrative, and then we're intelligent enough to do the structuring. Again, this gets back to that notion of how do we have the technology adapt to the user rather than the other way around. We're trying to make it as unobtrusive as possible for the physician to do what they need to do.
Do you have contracts with any of the biggies like Epic or Cerner, or is it kind of new?
Yeah, no. It's across the board with the with the EHRs. One thing, even on the if we look at Dragon Medical again specifically, across the board works with any of the EHRs, right? And we have great relationships with all the EHR vendors. In addition to that, from the pure embedded, so the example, kind of that demo, quick example I gave you on the mobile phone, with our developer program that we launched about 5 years ago, over the course of the last 5 years, we have nearly now about 120 EMRs, believe it or not, that are taking Dragon Medical and have embedded that. So that goes anywhere from the Epic, Cerner, eClinical, Meditech.
That includes them all.
Yeah, and then it goes down to niche providers within some of these specialty markets. So it really does provide that consistency from a physician standpoint.
Do you have any competitors in the field?
Yeah, there's with any space you're in, you have competitors, which is it's always great to have healthy competition. Right, it keeps us pushing and moving things forward. Actually, on that note, this is a perfect setup, but I'm going to take this opportunity. Can I share my screen again? I want to actually go back to one thing where I talked about some of the stuff that we're doing that's really differentiated, where we look at how we go beyond the EHR workflow. I just want to show you a quick example of what that looks like for a physician to be able to go through and see these other applications that are available if I can. So this should be back on my screen, so you should be able to see my phone again here.
Yes, we can see.
All right, great. So this is the healthcare ID. So I mentioned as part of this Dragon Medical One platform, we have the notion of this Nuance healthcare ID. So the first time a user logs in to the platform, they create their healthcare ID, and it's a one-time registration. They activate it, and from that point forward, they can get to their healthcare ID website. So you can think of the healthcare ID as their Apple ID, their Google ID. This website, you can think of it, you'll see when I get into it, this is going to look essentially like iTunes or Google Play, like an app store. So here, the physician now has the ability to log in, right? They get access to third-party applications that are enabled. In here, for example, I'll go through this. This is Imprivata Cortex, one of our launch partners. So we have the ability for a physician to activate their profile at no cost as part of this platform. So if they're licensed for Dragon Medical One, they have access to this catalog. So the big difference here is you can think of this as iTunes or Google Play. The difference is we're not selling application subscriptions or apps through this. We're essentially allowing the physician to activate with one click of a button their ID and their speech profile in a third-party app. So let me show you what that actually looks like. I have a demo app that we created just for the purpose of doing this. So let's go ahead and go through here. You'll see this is just a sample app that we've created in our research and development team. I'm going to click one button to activate the speech. It's going to open up that application, and it says it's enabled my healthcare ID. So now you'll see that bar again at the bottom. So what I showed you in that mobile EHR app is now accessible here as part of this application. So the physician could go in. Let's pretend this is just a basic demonstration app or a container app. But if we were to go in here, let's pretend this was a hospitalist sending a secure text message or communication to their primary care physician. So I'll go ahead and I'll hit the button, and you'll see what that experience again looks just like what we had before. Discharge fragile. 48. Next field. The overall condition remains fragile period. Make sure you conduct an updated medication reconciliation at the visit period. Stop listening. Again, you'll see here, this is a great example of using some of the templates. I did a little bit of a voice navigation to get to the next field. So that continuity, again, in the experience is really, really key here, really critical to be able to provide that consistency for the physician as they're moving between devices, platforms, workflows.
Very good. Hey, Gene?
Very cool. Yeah, it's hard to believe it does it so fast. That you can speak at that rate and it's still recognized.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, John, if you have any questions.
Yeah, I just have one quick comment. I had interactions with people using Google Glass Augmentics. I don't know if you've heard of that company in San Francisco.
Yep, yeah, I'm familiar with them.
Yeah, okay, it's the same thing. You know, the patient, the doctor's looking at the patient, like you say in your website, just like yours. There's more interaction, there's more eye contact with the patient. Do you have any comments on their system versus yours? Of course, yours is better, but I mean, any comments at all?
Yeah, so we're working with a number of vendors. I mean, the beauty of the technology is, as I mentioned a couple of times, we're form factor and device agnostic. So whether a physician, I have my whole arsenal of devices, right? Whether a physician is using their Surface Pro type tablet or medical tablet, whether they're using a smartwatch, whether they're using an Android device, an iPhone. I've got more devices here on the side of my table than I know what to do with. It's providing that consistency across it. So even an application like that, and we have worked with some of the vendors that were doing work in the Google Glass space, probably about 2 years ago when that all started to spin up. And they were actually leveraging the speech because, again, there's very little that's actually running on the device. It just requires very minimal bandwidth to be able to create that voice experience. So it depends on, I think it depends on the workflow. It depends on the end state goal that some of these vendors are trying to accomplish, right, in the workflows and where they fit in with all the other workflows that physicians have. But I mean, the general statement I can make on that is, I think the more, without becoming overwhelming, right, the more ways in which you can make it easier for the physician to do their job, and not even the physician, nurses and other professionals in the care setting, to do their job, to get the information in faster, to get it in accurate, to get it to meet the requirements that are needed for healthcare, all the better, right? All the better.
Oh yeah, anything that cuts down on paperwork, doctors love. So, well, any more questions, Gene, before we wrap it up? You got your mute on, Gene.
No, thank you, Jonathan, for coming. It was a great presentation and cool demo.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jonathan, thanks a lot, and good luck on the new platform. And we'll see you again in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. Thanks for the conversation.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.